Hi there, you're watching Grumpy Opinions. Well, here we are, folks. The season finale of Season 6 of Outlander, Episode 8, I Am Not Alone. Now, normally, this is where I would just kick in with a bit of a beginning waffle about what the show is about, but this time I'm just going to say, thanks for watching this season with me, everybody, and just in case you're interested, remember I do reviews of other shows, and there's plenty of them out there in the playlists. There's Handmaid's Tale, Catch-22, the last season of Game of Thrones, WandaVision, there's a whole bunch of stuff. Feel free to check it out. But let's get on with Outlander. Episode 8, I'm Not Alone, starts off exactly where last week's ended, with the Browns arrived outside Fraser's Ridge in force, demanding that they hand over Claire to be tried for murder. And of course, Jamie isn't having any of it, and there's a bit of a stalemate until one of the Browns tries to sneak into the house and Claire ends up gut-shotting him, kicking off a full-on Friday night gunfight. But turns out that Brown's no idiot, and he calls for a ceasefire, knowing that he can bide his time and that Jamie's not going to murder him in cold blood. And things stay this way for quite a while until the fisherfolk arrive like a lynch mob, but luckily they've got Obadiah at the front, who's enough of a religious fanatic that he won't stand for any kind of nonsense and believes that justice needs to be done. And even though the crowd is right up for having a hanging right there and then, between him and the arrival of Tom Christie, who also insists on justice being fairly done, things start to cool off a bit. And even though reinforcements arrive on the good guy's side, Jamie and Claire decide that the best course of action is just to go off with everybody in the wagon to face the music. And that takes a while because it's a 200-mile journey and it starts getting tough on everyone, especially when they arrive in one town and everyone gets a bit stone happy, and also because one of them falls dead off their horse halfway along. But before they can get to the jail, they surprise Jamie and he gets knocked out, but then Tom rides off to make sure Claire isn't killed and ends up seeing her safely to the prison in Wilmington. Jamie, on the other hand, wakes up and he's tied to a stick, about to be shipped back off to Scotland. Only luckily, wee Ian and Chief Bird's dudes turn up and they lay waste to all the bad guys, and Jamie rides off with them to save his wife from certain court appearance. Oh yeah, Roger and Brianna, they're still on the way to preschool and he ends up getting a haircut. End of season. So what did I think? Well, as you probably surmised from that fairly speedy recap of the episode, I actually thought this episode was a little bit on the slight side, but obviously not without good aspects. So let's just start out with the fact that the opening shootout, look, that was kind of a lot of fun. I mean, Outlander doesn't really do an awful lot of that kind of shooty out stuff, so it was kind of nice to have a bit of that sort of western style pew pew gun action. And it was also cool to see the Fraser arsenal locked up in the basement and in a cupboard, because clearly it makes sense that these people know what's coming down the line and they'd be stockpiling weapons just in case. Although I do have to question Jamie and Claire's amazing ability to only wound people. It's possibly realistic, but this is the kind of show that doesn't usually shy away from guns making people dead when it's convenient. Only here, it's the heroes and maybe they just didn't want them to be mass murderers in their own postcode, but yeah. Also, I'd just like to say that Chris Larkin is a severely underrated actor in the show, and it's a shame that he's been massively absent this season, because not only does he make that whole vowel-chewing colonial accent kind of work, and that's not easy considering he doesn't actually sound like that at all in real life.
He has, he's got an eye on, this is the rocking chair with his name on it on your porch.
The Brown's house.
The Brown's house.
You paint it brown though,
It's going to become, Brown's Ridge.
But this week, not only does he come across as a smart and clever enemy, but also one who isn't just a total rabid dog.
Well, you think I'm doing this because what happened to my brother? But I'm not. My brother was a lout. What he and them other men did to you, it was cruel and unforgivable. But you committed murder, Mistress Fraser. I need no other cause.
Yeah, I mean, I also thought this was funny because it just reminded me of like that bit on Die Hard 3.
You know, your brother was an asshole. Yeah, he really was an asshole.
He was an asshole. You got his number. Yeah?
Anyway, it's also the same as usual. Marcus Tom Christie is amazing, and we're seeing a very different side of him this time. I mean, dishevelled, unkempt, unshaved, and broken and grieving the death of his only daughter. I mean, apart from obviously the hair and the costume looking a bit dishevelled, I mean, there's so much little work done here with like little looks and micro expressions, and also sometimes just him not really doing much. It's subtle, great acting, and I like that kind of thing. Also, it was just nice to see the native supermodels again, and also John Bell's shonky bow work. I mean, not even that managed to lessen the kick-assness of this scene. Or this awesome bit where the guy gets shot through his hand, straight through his eye. I mean, that kind of thing, that's fun, you know? It's just fun. I'm a sucker for smart little clever bad guy deaths, and it was just a bit inventive. And I've got to be honest, the whole thing about Roger and Jemmy's paternity thing was actually really sweetly done. It felt kind of natural. It felt like the scenes of Roger and Bree were a nice little refreshing change from Jamie and Claire, and wee Jemmy was just being really sweet the whole time, and it's nice to just have that all cleared up, because, you know, it being hereditary and everything. Let's just hope that the Dread Pirate Bonnet never actually had any of them either, because, you know, it's not like they can go and check. But I'll say one thing, the stoning scene, that was a bit of a duffer. I mean, look, I get it, they're being stoned, it's not easy to film that, but this looked like it was a pie fight with pieces of plastic, and the rocks were bouncing off everything like the presumable wee lumps of polystyrene they probably were. So it was kind of hard to take this bit seriously. But also, a strange thing about this episode, after the tense excitement at the shootout and, you know, oh, what's going to happen, sense of that later siege, the whole wagon journey thing just felt like something that should have been in a completely different episode. Like, maybe that should have actually been one episode, and then the wagon should have been the second episode, because it kind of reminded me of season 1 of Outlander. What I mean by that is I couldn't help but remember stuff from season 1 where Claire was constantly being carted around or ridden around on horses across country and had no agency in anything she was doing. But in those episodes there was really a sense of discovery and dread. Here I just didn't have that. I mean, what's more, it was supposed to be a 200-mile journey, so which would have taken them, like, I don't know, like 2 weeks or something like that to go that far. But here it feels like they were literally only there for like a couple of days, and most of it was kind of an uneventful, boring trek across fields or just sitting out like they're having a picnic. And maybe this is a part of the story that works really well in the book. Maybe it's a long, interesting, introspective journey. But here, they make such a fuss about how they've got Tom to make sure they aren't murdered, and then that just kind of takes away the tension. And you think that that would be then the ideal place to have some character dialogue or something, so we could understand Tom, or understand Rich Brown, or any of these kind of things, but all we get is like this tiny wee exchange, which, as I said, I like, and then a bit of narration from Claire saying Tom didn't really say much for several days and nothing happened, don't ask, and then we got to prison. And that kind of bugs me. And then there was a bit where Jamie meets Ian at the pea tree, and that reminded me of a bit off of Crocodile Dundee too. But I'd like to observe something here. Jamie doesn't actually go for a pee, he just walks back unpeed, which kind of bugs me when that happens in films, and it happens a few times. Somebody always interrupts someone when they're away for a pee, so they never actually go for the pee. All that leaves in my head is this assumption that for the next few scenes the character's bursting to go to the toilet, which would explain why Jamie looks so pissed off all the time. But I think that might also just be a sign of how disconnected I feel with the show at this point, because similarly, I was just bored through the 2 sex scenes in this episode. I mean, I don't know why there was 2 sex scenes. I really didn't feel either of them was necessary. They just felt perfunctory rather than earned or needed, ticking in a box that, yep, it's Outlander, we have sex scenes, so there's a couple of sex scenes for you. I get they were going for the, oh, sex is clumsy sometimes with the stuff with Roger and Bree, but it just felt awkward, and it went on and on and on, and I was like, you know what? I don't feel I need to see this. But as I said, maybe that's just because that's where I'm at with the show at this point. A little bit disengaged. So where are things overall? Well, honestly, I think this easily stacks up for me as the least engaging, least interesting, and most disposable season of Outlander so far. I mean, let's face it, this is probably not going to be anybody's favourite season and high on anyone's rewatch list for the show, unless you're maybe the proud parents of the lassie who played Malva or something. Because half of this season felt like filler, another chunk felt like it was just peddling water, and there was a few diversions left and right, and they felt unnecessary, pointless, unresolved, or just downright silly. And I've also made the mistake this season of listening to the Outlander official podcast, which, I mean, there's an awful lot of backslapping self-congratulation in there, and isn't this wonderful, isn't everything great, Thinus talk, which you expect from, you expect that from an official podcast. It also doesn't help when it's Tony and Meryl repeatedly just saying, we love Jamie and Claire, we love Jamie and Claire, and I've complained about this in previous seasons, but it feels like a mantra to say the crazies out there in the fan base who might start bullying someone online if, they're worried that somebody changed a word of dialogue from the story or something. And I've got to be honest, I'm just a little bit bored at this point, and I know that they had problems with this season, and I know that the story's proper endpoint isn't going to be till later, and that Katrina's pregnancy and problems with COVID led to the whole season getting cut short by 4 episodes, but I feel like this has been a misstep in many ways. I mean, there's a lot of ways they could have worked around those problems. There's a lot of interesting, clever things they could have done to make it more engaging and more interesting. And instead, it feels like what they did is they just doubled down on the fan service. They slavishly adapted the easiest parts of the story they could without trying to fill in the gaps left by the stuff they've already used and adapted from earlier seasons. And we know that season 7's already filming. There's been photos and press releases and stuff about it. But going in, I honestly have to say, I think they're going to have to seriously step their game up, or this show is just going to start spiraling down the drain. But tell me, what did you think? You know, am I wrong here? Am I missing something? Has the show just become one solely for book fans now? Is it one that maybe just appeals more to ladies now rather than guys? Let me know in the comments. But for now, for Season 6 of Outlander, that's us done. And these have definitely been my grumpy opinions. Cheerio!